Time to go to work.
Excuse me.
I'm going to call the meeting to order. Can we have a roll call?
Everyone's here.
Okay.
All present and accounted.
Approve the agenda? A motion
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
and a second? I'll second it. Motion has been made and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Recognition of visitors. Does anybody have anything to say? You're on, but you have to come up here.
You come up front.
And push the little button with the little man icon on it so that your mic turns on.
And if you would be so kind as to introduce yourself and say where you live, please.
And who you represent.
Yeah.
My name is Julie Lammer and I live at N7889 540th on Tainter Lake. Been there for 8 years. And I am a realtor with Remax Affiliates. My donations, I decided to give back. And why not give back to the community, give back to the Lake District? So with every sale of either the buyer, the seller, or in this case, it was both. I sold a property on 784th. And both, I've got a donation from both the buyer and the seller here to give to the Lake District. I've got 3 more properties that will be closing on Tainter Lake. It's my focus right now. And I feel to be the Remax realtor entrepreneur of Tainter Lake. First of all, I believe in the lake. I explain to every buyer and every seller the pros and the cons, and a lot of pros going on right now. And I get really excited and positive. So why not give back to something for the people that are working with me? And you'll be getting 3 more checks coming in the next month. So I appreciate everything you guys are doing. You're making a big difference. And I get to talk about it personally because I'm moving people in from out of state. Right now I get to tell them that I hope you like the color green, and it's fine. And I say, you gotta like green trees, green grass, and green water temporarily. So, and you know what? I take the fear away from coming here, and I really have seen a huge positive for the 8 years that I've been on the lake. So thank you guys for all you're doing.
Thank you, Julie, for all you do.
You're welcome.
Would you like some money?
Thank you. Any other comments? People willing to or wanting to speak? Seeing that nobody's running up here, we'll close this segment and move on. Normally we have reports by commissioners, but the guy that put the agenda together forgot to put that on there. But I will just say 2 short comments was that, first of all, I had a meeting this week with, and Tom went to it with the Water Quality Partnership, which is area organizations working on conservation and water quality. It's everything from ag to biologists and everything else. So it's a diverse group. There's college professors, there's all kinds of other people that belong to this with the sole focus on the Red Cedar watershed and making a difference. So we had that meeting. It was a good meeting. So with that, treasurer's report.
Well, with Julie Lammer's. I'm sorry, with Julie's generous donation and another generous donation from Tim and Lisa Maves today, our savings, we currently have $5 in savings and $4,295.17 in checking. Thank you to those generous donators.
Any questions for the Secretary Treasurer? All right, on to discussion. Oh, by the way, for the audience, if you go onto our website, you can look at the agenda also, because the agenda is posted on the website. And the other thing is, we're getting better at this, but we're going to try to put more information, meeting information on there also, so that Jim put the budget on there. So when we talk about the budget discussion, all you got to do is go on your phone, and it's in a PDF format. Go on your phone and you'll be able to follow that one. We're going to get better at putting those agendas together, but this month this is the second of 3 meetings that we're going to have. By the time the time in between meetings and you start stacking those up, there just isn't enough time 2 weeks in advance to get meeting information listed on the agenda. But we're going to do our best once we get to once a month meetings, week before, to be able to have materials on there so that you can look at them before you come. We're working on that. It's just a little crude right now. So with that in mind, we're going to go to the first discussion and action item, which is Lake District bylaws. And you're up.
Thank you. All right, well, thanks to your email with a couple of bylaws that you sent, and looking through the UW Stevens Point site and looking at others and the People of the Lakes Guide and so forth. Beaver Dam seems to be most succinct and one that I want to work from and modify. But I dug into this, and all of a sudden I'm stumbling very quickly on Article 1, Section 1 and 2, Article 2, 1, 2, and 3. And the reason why is because I went to the statute, or statute 33, whatever, the state law,
Right.
and the state website, and was searching through that. And in my mind, I'm trying to wrap my head around who votes. Right? And the term elector is the basic term. And the state statute does not necessarily define who an elector is. So Section 1 in this thing here says multiple voting. It says any elector may cast only one vote on any question called to vote. I kind of agree with that. But let's define elector. So let's say my neighbor has 2 properties and he and his wife are listed on the tax bill. And do they get 4 votes? And my wife and I have 2 properties listed under our trust. And so we get 1 vote for the trust. So they get twice as many votes just because it's not in a trust. Or, so there's also state law around the non-resident multiple owners and, residents, non-residents, and we can talk about all that. But I want to understand in my head and make very clear in our bylaws what an elector is, because an elector gets 1 vote. And what the relationship is between a resident and or property owner or non-resident, or whatever the owner is, how many votes. And because if I have 6 names on my title, I don't think I can probably have 2. Why do they get 2 and my trust only gets 1? Or, if I have 2 properties, which I do that are in the district, do I get 2 votes at the meeting? 1 for each property? So, well, thanks for your input, Tom, but we need to define that
Right.
in these bylaws. And so these are all the questions I came up when I'm defining it. So Tom has an answer for me. Does anyone else have thoughts on what an elector is? Clearly define what an elector is in reference to one who lives on the lake and one who owns property on the lake.
And these are good discussions, and I appreciate the fact that you want that spelled out before the annual meeting, because I think between the four of us, it should be crystal clear. Because I can just see this now as we're standing behind the registration table, there's gonna be somebody that's gonna say, well, what about this? And we're gonna have to have it clear in our heads as to the best of our understanding, this is what it's going to be.
I agree. And what came to my head pretty quickly was, boy, we need a link in our invite to the annual meeting. That's here's the bylaws that we're gonna be voting on.
Right.
And here's a link to, or this link has all the stuff.
And here's the rules we're following.
Here's the rules we're following. Here's the nominated candidates for the positions, or at least for the commissioners
Right.
and board members. And how many we're gonna have. The
Right.
state law is gonna 5 or 7. You two are appointed. We would be elected.
Right.
And we would have a third elected, but you could have fourth and fifth elected.
Right.
And then in this first meeting, we need to define who gets a 3-year term, who gets a 2-year term, and who gets a 1-year term. And I think that's pretty easy with the number of votes you get.
Right.
Because it is a secret ballot that we will have to have a ballot and hand out. But I get ahead of myself on that. Meeting stuff we'll cover later. Somebody else will cover later
Right.
in the agenda, but so you say one person gets 1 vote, no matter how many properties I have and no matter how many titles I'm on, and if I have my wife on my titles or my trust on the titles.
Trust, on a trust, you assign someone to vote, right? 1 vote. If you have a property in trust, there's 1 person that does the voting.
That's what I read.
Yep, okay. Then, if I remember what was said specifically at the meeting in Stevens Point, that if you have a husband and wife are the owners of that property, they vote. If you also have husband, wife, and then maybe brother-in-law and sister-in-law that are all 4 on the title, they get 4 votes. No.
Well, I'm shaking my head because that's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
That's crazy.
I'm not
I get
saying
1
it's-
vote, I have 1 property.
I'm not saying it's
Why
right or
would
wrong.
you get 4 votes? Because you got 4 people listed on your property.
Right.
No. But it's also the same way if you own, if someone's renting your property for the week. Okay, and they have husband, wife, and a couple kids over 18, they can all vote.
We define the rules. We define
Well,
what an elector is.
yeah, but what I'm saying is for the state. That's what we were told. They said that the state is very inclusive when it comes to voting.
I'm not reading that in here.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm not reading that in these from Beaver
And
Dam.
is this where we need a legal?
No, I disagree. I
Okay,
think
I'm
we
just,
make
that
them
I'm
up.
just asking.
We make up
So-
the bylaws, and if we all agree on them and they get voted in, that's what the bylaws are. As long as they don't contradict section 30, whatever the state's statute 30.
And if there's
whatever.
nothing in there specifically,
Yes.
I think if you go to section 6, in the state statute, 6.1. In this bylaws, which is, electors. They, that's who's an eligible voter for the. district.
Section 33, 32.
No, look under here.
No, yeah,
That's the Wisconsin voting laws.
Lake District. So this is just Trago.
Right,
I
right.
don't think that's right, because it's really defined in 3330-2.
Yeah, but in state statutes, there's other ones also that define who gets to be elected, because I don't know that we can make, well, first of all, I don't know that we can make voting restrictions that are more restrictive than the state. So in
So-
other words, we couldn't say, well, you gotta be 21 to vote. Yeah,
Okay, I agree,
But
but however, I'm in the Wisconsin state statute. This is 33.30 annual meeting of the district.
Yep.
Every district shall have an annual meeting is number one. Number two is the annual meeting shall be preceded by a written notice. Talks about electors a little bit. It doesn't say, doesn't define them yet. In section 3333, it talks about at the annual meetings, electors and property owners who attend the meeting shall do the following. Electors and property owners may do the following. Ballots, qualified electors. From what I found in the state statute, it never defines what an elector is.
it may define that in statute 6.1, but let's back up a second. I think we're getting in the weeds here a little bit because there's,
I'll circle that and
right, we'll come back to that in a second because let me help you define how, or help you, because this is how I had to do it in my head. There's electors, okay, and electors is anybody that's of legal age to vote, basically, okay? They have to be 18, okay? Now, underneath that, they have to be a citizen of the United States or Wisconsin, the United States. Okay, because people that live in Minnesota are eligible to vote on this too, okay? Now, underneath that, you have two categories. One is a resident and one is a owner, okay? And so a owner gets to vote and a resident gets to vote. All
so
right,
define owner and define resident for me.
owner is some whose name appears on the deed.
The
okay.
Porter Trust appears on the deed.
Okay, well, let me get to that in a minute, okay? So you have owner and you have resident, okay? A resident does not have to be an owner, but it's somebody that lives on the lake.
I get that. Just,
Okay.
are they the owner, are they the resident today? On the meeting of the annual date?
That we get to define that,
Yeah,
okay?
I would hope so.
Well, or we can define that as somebody that can legally vote. Like I said, they have to be, I would say they have to own property or they have to be living there and it's up to them to prove that they're living there, okay? I'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, we have to understand what that
Okay,
living there means.
So then you have owners and residents, and then, so that's where you start getting into trusts. And those, you get one, but now in the case of you and your wife, as if she's not listed as in the trust, but she's a resident because she lives there, so she would get a vote. Okay. And somebody's, the same would hold true if my wife were not on the deed, okay? If she was not listed, and there's some people that are not listed, you know, husband and wife or common, whatever. They're still residents, so they'd still get to vote. Now, while they may not be listed anywhere, but they would show a driver's license and say, this is my place of residence, this is where I live, you're a resident. So you could vote that way. If I had an 18-year-old son that lived at home or daughter who lived at home, they would get to vote because they're of legal voting age, but they're a
So I
resident.
like your analogy in the tree structure as we come down from citizen,
Right.
18 years old,
Right.
resident, owner.
Right.
You know, a deed,
It-
so forth. However, why do we want more than one vote per property? Because if Tom has 5 kids at his house, they're all over 18, and they all are listed on his address. And so the 7 of them for that one property are gonna get 7 votes compared to my 2. And my property is worth more than Tom's, so I'm gonna get more tax. And he's gonna have 3.5 times the voting power I am. To me, that doesn't seem like,
I didn't say it'd be equal.
Well- no, it's supposed to be fair, right?
Right, but you take that same analogy to any election. You take your school board election. It's the same because they are a resident of the district. Everybody that is a resident in that district gets a vote. Because my neighbor has 5 kids and they all live at home. They get 7 votes to my wife and I, there are 2. I mean, that's just the kind of the way it works.
And those are typically bigger issues. I know that the property taxes and so forth may depend on some of that
but
for the
the-
school board.
But the school board, the budget is approved at the annual meeting, just like us. And so,
But I don't get to go in and vote on it.
yeah, you do. At the annual meeting, you can show up at the annual meeting and
For a
they-
school board?
Yeah, for the school district budget. Every year, every school district, the 426 school districts in the state of Wisconsin, every year they have an annual meeting. And you can vote that budget in. You can vote it up, you can vote it down.
Learn something.
Typically, it used to be like the wild, wild west out there because before a lot of some rule changes, people would go to an annual meeting and they would vote $1 million cut in a school budget. And you're going, holy cow, now we got to cut $1 million out of the school budget in July when the school year starts in 2 years. They've changed some laws. School boards now can go back and put the budget back in place in November. That's going to meet the needs of the school district. But
So
yes.
that's kind of moot then, that it
Well,
really doesn't matter.
What happened was people abused it and then they make rules to stop that. But my point is the same. Is that on an annual meeting for a school board or for a school district, the public gets to vote on that. Now, typically and since 1993, when they put in levy limits and things like that, most people don't show up at an annual board meeting because the tax levy is set by a formula anyway. But you can conceivably get enough people together, go in and change the budget if you wanted to.
Well, and that's my concern is that they will be voting on projects and they will be voting on our budget as well as the commissioners of board
Right.
members
Right.
of the Lake District. So if I get 20 friends to rent property for that week, month, whatever, and in the 3rd year of this, nobody shows up, but thank you for showing up tonight. But if
Yep.
we get very low turnout, we could easily sway the vote.
I agree with you 100%. I know what you're saying. I don't like it either. But I don't know that we can have rules different than what the state.
Yeah, because I'm wondering, is it defined as far as like a rent, like a resident? How long they have to be a resident?
There's the key.
Because it's like, because you could like Jerry's getting at, somebody could, hey, I'm gonna rent out. I mean, I don't know who's gonna abuse this, but I'm gonna have 50 people come stay at my house the day of the annual meeting and I'm gonna rent it to them. So they're all residents today. I mean, I can understand like the residents the people, I think of the one big property that's on the lake that has a number of people, residents there as the log in it's a apartment complex. So that's all of them could conceivably be able to
Be voting.
voting, but I understand that because they're just, somewhat longer term residents. But getting to Jerry's point about, okay, is it defined like the length of time that someone has to be a resident in the statute, or are we able to define that in the bylaws that you have to have been a resident, that you're a renter for a month or something like that, and not just a renter for the day?
In my mind, we have a better chance of putting residency restrictions on voting than we are restrictions on who can vote. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think You are both on it because it does define in the law about property owning requirements, but it doesn't define resident.
And
Can we define resident as one who has your driver's license on a property on the lake?
for 30 days, or you have to live in that address.
No, I
long
said
enough.
driver's license. Your driver license has to have an address on it that's in the district.
Right.
Therefore, you are a resident.
Or do you make it like for voting where if they haven't had their driver's license changed, but they've gotten a bill?
Right.
At that address,
I
potentially?
I would say the
Potentially.
onus is on them to prove residency.
Well, and they're gonna have to sign off on a form that says they're in compliance, right?
Yeah, well,
Well,
That's-
if we define residency, so yeah, in compliance
right,
with our
right.
definition of residency, yes.
and we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but on the, one of the things that I picked up at the lakes and rivers is a Lake District voter certificate. So what that would be is in this case, or in the case of, let's say, your wife, who's a resident, if she shows her driver's license, okay, all she has to do is sign one of these forms, and she's in Lake Flint. Okay, and all it does is it gives us, number one, it gives us a name to add to our list. Okay, the other thing is it's saying that they are a resident, and they're just testifying to the fact that they're a resident, to keep people from abusing the system. If I bring in 100 people for one day I don't know that we're gonna have that big of an impact. I think we have bigger issues if somebody's doing that than just.
So you're saying with this certification, I don't need to look at the driver's license, or I don't need to look at a bill to see their name on a bill. They're just certifying that A, they own land within the boundary, B, resides within the boundaries of the Lake District, or is an official representative officer or employee authorized to vote on behalf of a trust, foundation, or corporation.
I would say we look at their driver's license, have them sign that,
Why look at the driver's license?
because then they prove that they're,
So we're gonna prove these things?
we don't have to. But I would say to Jim's point, that if somebody shows up, it's on the onus is on them to prove that they're a resident, and a driver's license will be one, or we just use the driver's license and say, fine, you're a resident. If there's somebody that we're questioned, we use this, and then the onus is on them too, if they're falsifying their residency.
So then we're gonna use that to go check up on it later, or?
I think it gives us a leg up on if something is amiss and we have to go back. Or we can add names to that list as we go along.
Yeah, I like that, and I'm not
I think,
wrong with that, but however, as a certified poll worker and previous poll worker, state of Wisconsin requires voter ID to vote. Why wouldn't we?
I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, so
And then we could, also have that provisional thing that the state has where if they like show the provisional ballot or have that form, if they don't have their driver's license with, or they just moved or just bought a house, I don't know. And then they could.
well, say it's in my trust and I don't have my driver's license because I live in Minnesota, but my property on
good
the lake
point.
is
There-
in my trust.
Yeah,
And I'm speaking as a representative, then
Of the trust, but,
then we have a form, but then
and I'm not,
all we have to do is have them put the trust on there so that the next guy that comes through, there isn't 5 people
Oh.
that.
right, and my
Right.
deed is gonna show the trust name on there, the
Right.
corporation or whatever it is.
Right.
Okay, so thank you very much. The tree structure helps a great deal.
It did to me too.
Yeah, and
me.
I think that if we're in alignment on the using Wisconsin voting things as far as a driver's license, and then this is a last resort if they didn't bring their whatever to prove their,
two phone bill or a phone bill and.
Does that,
well, that doesn't, it's the trust, or the corporation or the,
does that form have like the property in question?
I think it, yeah.
Yeah,
Signature-
print name,
No,
ownership, we could certainly.
Yeah,
add
it
that.
needs to, yeah, because it would need to have like,
What is the trust, if you're being the representative of a trust, what trust?
yeah, address, where it says name, address, Tainter Lake, property address, so that it's associated with that particular. Maybe I'll write that.
Okay, while we have a second here. Just so my mind is right here when I write this up, we're gonna consider an elector, number one, 18 or older. Citizen of the US.
mhm.
They have to be an owner with a name and the title. Or a resident that lives on the lake. Trusts get one vote. We're gonna require a driver's license. And then if something's in question, we will have them complete the form.
So it goes 18 citizen residents proved by your driver's license. Then the next one that's kind of open is a owner. So owners can be trusts, corporations or whatever, or non-residents.
Right,
So that's kind of my hierarchy that I think you went through,
Well-
Al.
you have non-resident property owners. And then it's every person whose name appears on as
Listed on the deed.
listed on the deed.
Well, that's just owner.
Right,
I mean, resident supersedes that.
right,
Yeah, and didn't
But-
this come up though, at the last meeting where somebody said that that there's 4 people that own it, but actually only one name or something's on the deed?
no,
Or something, it was something.
Resident supersedes it. So my wife can vote because
right,
my trust is the one owner,
Okay,
but she's a resident. Her driver's license says she's a resident. She can vote.
right,
So it's 18 US citizen resident via driver's license.
right.
The next thing is owner, resident or
Pro-
not, I don't care.
Property
Yeah,
owner,
property owner,
right,
and that's listed by the deed, who's on the deed.
right.
And if it's 5, but I think our deeds only are limited to 2 is what their point was, right?
Right.
It was the
Uh-huh.
primary and the secondary were listed on deeds.
I think you're right. Yeah, I
So
think
there-
that you're right. Yeah,
So there
that's
are
what,
2.
that
They
was
were
their point.
complaining that, hey, we have 5 people that own this, but only 2 are listed on the deed.
Right.
Yeah.
So
This one has any corporation, partnership, or association that owns real property in the district may appoint an official representative,
1 vote, yep.
right? And that would be non-resident property owners, so that if I had a call from a guy that lived in Nebraska. Okay, so he's a non-resident, but he's a property owner. He would get 1 vote. Okay,
Well, it depends how many names are on the deed. If he has 2 names on the deed, he gets 2, those 2 people get to vote if they're there,
right, if they're there,
if they're there.
you have to be in person. Yeah, and the non-resident property owner, I think we need to define a little, especially out-of-state people. Because they get to vote also,
Yeah, they're owners.
right?
It doesn't matter if they're live there or not.
Yeah, it's
If
like
they live
that.
there, they're a resident, so
But-
that it doesn't matter who owns it.
Yeah, but this does not say property owners. It says resident property owners,
I-
it says residents.
I
And so,
I agree with that. This isn't very clear. That's why I'm talking about this.
yeah,
And I want to break it down just in the tree you said,
right,
and you are an elector if you meet one of these things.
right,
And an elector gets 1 vote.
right,
So therefore, my wife gets 1 vote and I get 1 vote.
right,
I don't get 2 votes because I have 2 properties.
correct.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
And Tom gets 7 because he has the 5 kids and his wife, so. Sorry, Tom.
Well,
Just give you.
12 kids.
12, thank you. I don't know if you have any or not, so I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
couldn't pick it.
Pico has a nice way of saying that,
I don't like that. I
yeah,
read that as well. I don't like it.
Yeah,
I think your explanation is much clearer.
well,
At least it worked in my head.
I don't.
All right, let's move on because we're gonna run out of time. But
Okay. But why don't we do this? This is what I would like to do is I'd like to have us define that. And then ship that to Eric Olson at the, he's not an attorney, but he's the,
how about our corporate counsel for the county? Can we utilize them a little bit?
Can always
Right.
ask.
We can try.
I can ask.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can try.
that would be wonderful, just to get. This is where we could run afoul, and
I hope to have it very clear and not break state law.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
thank you.
And we don't want those questions come the annual meeting and we're sitting there, well, we didn't quite figure this out and,
That's why I'm looking at the two you showed me and then went back to the statue and I'm like, these are not clear.
Right.
I couldn't figure it out. So anyways, one elector gets one vote.
I think that's the main, what we're trying to do is
Right.
clarify one vote, one person.
Yeah. And define what an elector is. All right, you have to be at the meeting.
Right,
And time and place, that's just state law. Notice, that's state law. Nomination of commissioners. I'd like to see something around that, is that our bylaws say we will have a slate of nominees published in the notice. What do you think of that?
I think it would be helpful. My only question would be this. What happens? I think it would be good. I don't know that. Does it need to be a bylaw would be my question. Would we want to say that 45 days or before the annual meeting that people shall submit their names to the board, and the board would be the nominating committee instead of having a separate nominating committee, because I don't think we need to be that complex. That they submit it, and then as a function of our responsibility, we would want to put that slate of officers up for notification. But that does not preclude write-ins.
Right, absolutely. As written here, it says, the main point I'm trying to make is that we have a printed ballot ahead of the meeting. And yes, there is space for writing candidates.
Right.
How we get that list and how soon that is. I picked the available in the notice because that you've got a deadline.
Right.
And that's stated in all the other notices, things around 10 days in advance, yada, yada.
Right.
So it has to be done by then.
Right.
And that allows us to have a printed ballot. So as far as how they get on that ballot, I think it's up to the commissioners. I agree, I don't need a special nominating committee. We certainly could if you want, but we have to come up with a slate is the bottom line, and we have to do it in time to get a written ballot, which I would think would just be in time to get on the notices.
Right.
My logical
Right.
progression.
Right. I don't have any problems with saying 45 days in advance of the annual meeting, because then that way we can put that gives us time for printing prior to 14 days. At least 14 days, we have to send that out. I'm hoping that we're gonna send it out 20 days before the annual meeting. That would that would buy us a little more time. You know what I'm saying, to be able to get it on. What I don't want to do is schedule the printing and taking all that stuff there, and then all of a sudden cut ourselves. We have a deadline after the printing for being able to nominate.
Absolutely, one ahead of time. The process in which they get on the list. Is it that we create the list, the commissioners create the list from names that have been submitted to us at some time prior to us creating the list. Or is it has to be some official? They have to be submitted to the secretary 45 days in advance, and then we go through that list and say, we're gonna take these 6 out of the 40 that you've gotten, or whatever it is.
You and I seem to be doing all the talking. I gotta get these. two-
Jim's clued in, he's watching, and
I'm-
Tom's trying to keep
yeah.
up with meeting notes. I
Yeah.
appreciate that effort, so.
Yeah, and I
haven't read them yet.
no, I agree with, you know, with Jerry that there has to be some sort of system for how that is done. And whether there's some sort of criteria for, you know, being submitted, because otherwise, you know, with in 900 potential things, you could have 100 people suddenly with names. We've got a ballot that's several pages long.
Mhm.
And I don't know what that criteria is, or if we create any criteria, if it's a free for all and anybody who wants to throw their name in, you know, the ring can kind of get in there, or if you want to, because like for the PR&D committee, you know, for those of you guys, you submitted your names, right? And then you did a little write-up or something, or
4 questions, we answered 4 questions.
you know, could it be the same sort of thing? Or, you know, I don't want people to look at us as being, oh, we're keeping people out, or we're trying to put our fingers on the scale. But I'm trying to avoid chaos with having a ballot that has 100 names on it, and legitimately, you know, 95 of them are just, they're either doing it because they, you know, were sitting down at Pioneer and said, I'm gonna put my name on it, you know, or whatever. Or they have to be nominated by somebody. You know, sometimes with boards or commissions, it's like, you can nominate yourself. And then there's a thing why you want to be nominated, or someone else can nominate somebody else. I don't know. But I'm thinking that there has to be some sort of system. Otherwise, it's going to be a free for all.
My opinion would be that our role as the nominating committee would be, number 1, are they residents or eligible?
Yeah.
Are they
Electors.
18?
Electors,
Right, are they 18? Are they residents? Or are they property owners? And then after that,
Well,
Yeah, we
what
should-
about, here's something. As a Dunn County supervisor,
Right.
in order for me to be on a ballot, I have to collect signatures.
Right.
I don't think that it's outside of the realm of a requirement to require 5 signatures. You know, one of the things that it does, I hate doing it. I hate going around, even like most of the time I talk to friends. I'll go sit at Jake's on a Sunday during a Packers game, and I'll sign your papers, buy me a beer or whatever.
if they
But
don't
it-
have the last name Zahn. on
Yes,
there.
no. And then I have to make sure they're actually in my district, but it kind of requires you to make some effort. Cause the thing I'd hate to see is that this requires work to be on this commission. And I'm hoping that most people that want to run for it are taking it seriously enough that they're willing to put in some time and do meetings and whatever. And I think that collecting at least signatures on a nomination form would kind of, it shows you're serious about it, that you want to get, if you know 5 of your neighbors or 5 people, you can go down and sit at Jake's one day. Are you on the lake? Would you sign my nomination papers? I want to be on the Lake District Commission. I think that would be a reasonable requirement, and it would also filter out the people who just happen to be, out on the sandbar someday thinking that I'm gonna run. I'm putting my name in right now.
Well, now I know where I'm gonna go get my signature.
Well, yeah, you could. That'd be pretty easy. The other day I saw probably 50 pontoons sitting over there, so. But I think that's a reasonable requirement. That's not anybody, anybody who wants to be, nominated. And I can even dig up the same kind of paperwork that you have to do for, I mean, any elected official in the state of Wisconsin has to collect signatures. And the number of signatures you collect is based on actually the number of representatives or the size of a district. So
School board members.
How about if I put together a form that has maybe two of the questions, or I don't remember the questions that we filled out for the PR&D, but I agree, those questions and a blank for 5 signatures, and we could say, this is the form, and in the bylaws, here are the questions, and it requires these questions be completed with 5 signatures of your
And is
district
that what you were
members.
saying would be required 45 days before?
Bingo.
That's a problem.
Is that?
Well, considering that the date of the annual meeting is August 5th, that puts us at about June 20th.
I've been asking people to be commissioners, so
Yeah.
we need to be recruiting. We need to
I-
get people
I
aware
have
of this
been as-
process.
I have been as well. It's just that we aren't going to be able to meet again until after that form is due. So what if for this year, I mean, future years, let's go with 45 days. This year, let's go with 30 days. That gives us time.
When's printing? July 1st?
Fifth, yeah.
Oh, we have to even, yeah.
Yeah, but we don't have to print the names this year.
Yes, we do.
Okay, well,
You gotta have a ballot.
but.
It must be a
you have-
secret ballot.
Yeah, but the printing the ballot is different than posting the names on the document that goes out.
Oh, okay,
True.
okay.
And so my only problem with answering questions is that it isn't our job to weed it out. It's the assembly's job to weed out the legitimate. I think it's a reasonable request for people that have their name on the ballot to stand up and ask the question or to present to the assembly why they're running. And in fact, that was going to be one of my recommendations. Because the appointing of the board from the appointing of the commissioners from the county board was a little bit different because that's an appointment as opposed to an election. And I think if we start putting questions together, I think we're putting, who's going to decide? Is it going to be you? Is it going to be us? I mean,
Well, there's two things. We have to decide who's nominated, which is different from who's elected. So your point to get them up and say, here's my platform I'm running on is one thing.
Right.
Versus us saying, these 5 people will be on the ballot for these 3 seats. So somebody's got to determine who's on the ballot, right?
Right.
And how do we determine who's on the
Well,
ballot?
again, I get back to the nomination. You have to get 5, whatever the number we decide. You have to have 5 signatures on your nominee. Like if you run for county board supervisor, you don't have to say anything about what you're going to do when you get on the county board, but you have to have 5. You have to have 25 signatures of residents in your district. So we could say at least to be on the ballot that you have to collect signatures, just like you would for another position.
So we don't want to be a filter for the nominating process?
it all depends how wide a screen you want that filter to be.
I just ran for the Dunn Energy Board.
Yeah.
And their board must filter down to 2 for each district. And then that write-up is then used in the literature. You probably saw my photo. If you're a Dunn Energy member, you're
Excellent.
probably Excel, but
I saw it.
Can we develop the ballot? And then give those candidates that are on the ballot 2 minutes.
Yep.
At the annual meeting and before we vote. To
Or-
let them review their campaign.
Or if they just have X number of words in a written statement that we can say, this is a candidate, his name, and their statement. I'm shy. I don't want to get up in front of an annual meeting. I'll choke or something, you know. So
Say, you're not talking about yourself. right here.
So I don't necessarily think that their performance in public speaking at the annual meeting should be oh, he could speak, but you know.
So could they all right, if you don't want to do that way, can they submit their nominating papers? We have nothing to do with who gets on the ballot or not. But we post them on the website and people can go on the website and review it. So we don't waste a bunch of time when it comes to the annual meeting.
I like that.
And then we're out of it, and then friends or enemies aren't involved in the process.
So the barrier to being on the slate of candidates is 5 signatures and a write-up or
A statement,
X number of a statement.
statement I can live with because it explains who you are.
So it's the 5 signatures and a statement, and we could have 100 candidates if
Yep.
we get 100 candidates that get 5 signatures. And we're okay with it?
We pretty much have to be.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
But-
a nominating
but-
committee would be totally different.
right, but I mean, that's if adding some criteria by at least having to collect some signatures, however many it is, and having to write a statement is gonna filter out some people. It's gonna filter out the drunks that are at the sandbar. I mean, I don't want to pick on the drunks because I'm a drunk
Oh, no.
sometimes, so. But what I'm saying is that it puts a little effort into it. And the little bit of effort is gonna filter out some people. So if getting 5 people to sign something, because a lot of people aren't gonna want to sign something,
5 electors, yes.
you know.
Okay.
So getting five electors and having that criteria and having a statement is gonna filter out some. If we get 100 people, great. If you're that motivated and you went out and collected 5 people and you got a signature and then it's like, it's gonna make it, it'll be more of a challenge to get elected. Cause you're gonna have to collect people, but at least there is some sort of filtering, so it's not just throw my name in, you know?
And that has to be completed and submitted to us or submitted to the secretary X days ahead of the meeting. How many days?
I would say 45 on a normal year, but this year, I think we have to say probably,
And that can even be written into the bylaws that
Right.
a normal year, 45 days, but prior to the first annual meeting, it's 30.
30.
Okay, I can write that. We haven't got there yet. So for right now, it's defined as 3 voted, 2 appointed. 1 by the county and 1 by the township.
Okay, so when we say signatures, are we limiting signatures to people that live
Electors,
to electors?
To
Okay,
electors.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay,
thank you.
Okay, a couple of, I just kind of bring this to a closure a little bit. Number one, if we have 100 people that want this, that's a good problem to have because that's democracy at work.
Yeah,
Okay. It's gonna cost us a little more at the annual meeting because it's gonna take a lot longer, but I think that we can I've been at assemblies that where they have multiple votes and you just continually have multiple votes until you start to weed it down. I don't see that as a big issue.
well, I was thinking that the top vote getter gets the 3-year term.
Yep,
right.
The second vote getter gets 2 years. And so there's no ranked choice, you just vote for 3.
Right.
Is it vote for, and that's to
Right.
her. not timed well question, because you can't talk during the meeting, but,
Well, that's.
sorry.
Never stopped before.
That's going to be my second thing. Normally, we don't take comments from the
Yeah,
audience, but for this subject, I would propose that we open it up to comments from to hear what because a lot of these people have been to every meeting, and I'd be curious to hear your feedback. Now, with that being said, I want it succinct, and you get one shot at it, so that we're not here till 8 o'clock at night, okay?
can I get through a few more questions before we do that?
Sure.
And
Just to give people an opportunity to have something to say. Just, we're gonna do a couple more items and then we're gonna come back to.
and we'll get into the recruiting and so forth and making this known in the annual meeting preparations that's next on the agenda. But first, we have a choice of 5 or 7. Are we good with 5?
I want 7. That's
The
me.
total board.
Yeah, only because I think moving forward, there will be enough to keep 7 people busy. You know, I think we're gonna want to break out some committees to work on different things, fundraising certainly, and project development. And if we want to market ourselves a little bit, things like that.
Or even just leading committees that do those things?
Yes.
I agree with
Yes.
that.
I-
5 or 7.
I have no problem. I can go either way. I've worked with boards either way, but 7, I think at this juncture would be.
I'm kind of in the same point as Al. I could go either way, but I do see the benefit of 7, especially like as we are right now, down 1. If something were to happen, then it'd be harder to function. It's easier to function if you've got 7 and lose somebody.
Right.
And you can get along until you appoint or something, so.
My experience with that, Jerry, has been that 7 is a common number and it seems to work well. And to Jim's point, if you lose one, 6 is better than 4. Simply because it divides the workout.
Right.
And for the fact that we don't have an administrator or, a clerk or somebody that feeds and organizes this. Many hands do light work or make the work a little lighter. And the other thing is if we get to the point where most boards downsize from 7 to 5, when they run with 2 seats open a lot. So in other words, if there ever gets to be a point where people don't want to serve on the board, or you can't.
That was
find
my next
people,
question.
You can't.
That's
find
my next
people,
question. Yeah.
Then at the annual meeting, you say, let's go to 5.
Yeah.
And we run people out of their terms and there's an election and boom, that's how you do it.
So I'm good. I like 7. 7's good. So the 3-2-1 thing, term wise. So now you have 5 that are elected.
Funny you should mention that because.
And then so how many get 3-year terms?
How mu-
2, 3-year?
Yeah, I could see that. 3, 2, 1, 3, 2.
Here's funny you should mention that because I did put a
Or
pencil
2,
to that.
3, 1. 2, 1, excuse me, 2, 1, 2.
2 3s, 2 2s, and a 1.
Would you want to do it that?
I
way?
was saying it was 2 3s, 1 2, and 2 1s.
Okay.
I did it. 2 3s, 2 2s, 2 1s.
Well, that's 6. Doesn't add up. That new math?
Yeah, it is. Actually, that's old, man, and that's spending too much time in my basement, but I think we can do there's never going to be an even way to split up. In 3 years and 7 people, there's always gonna be 1 year,
That's if nobody ever drops out, so.
Right.
I'm guessing
Right.
you will have people drop out, so.
So 3, 2, 1, that's fine.
What was your suggestion?
2 3-year terms, 1 2-year term, and 2, excuse me, one 2-year term and two. But I think it makes more sense the other way. So let's go 2 3-year, 2 2-year, and 1 1-year.
That's,
And if someone
Yeah.
drops out, then
Yeah.
it's,
that's what I said, wasn't
I think Jim said.
it?
That's what I said.
Well, I agree with it. I
You said
did,
2 2 2.
You pointed some additional commissioners.
I did, I apologize. I'll
No
close
worries.
my mouth.
No worries. All right.
But-
All right, so we're good on 7 and those terms. Now we just need to get candidates. Nomination of commissioners, eligibility commissioners. Electing commissioners. Law, other business. So this section 8. The annual meeting shall take up and consider such other business as comes before it. So annual meetings are free for all, and then if it's, doesn't have to be on the agenda, or,
It has to be on the agenda.
so section 8 should be removed? Or is that
Under section 8,
that's
under
3320?
section 8. Oh, powers and duties, which,
I'm sorry, page 3 of the Beaver Dam one.
um,
3320.
page 3.
No, it's not even in the,
I'm not following. Where you are.
right here. Section 8.
Under which major heading?
Oh, Article 3.
What's the question?
Annual meeting shall take up and consider such other business as it comes before it. Meaning it doesn't need to be on the
No.
agenda for the annual meeting.
I think that's taking up any business that is a legitimate power of the annual meeting that's been submitted and is on the agenda. That's been placed on the agenda.
Okay. So this is kind of moot, or?
Yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, there are the definition of the things that the annual meeting is
Does.
spelled out,
Yeah,
and then
that's what-
section 8 would be something else, like we're
That we put
considering.
on the agenda.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep, that's not defined by those previous 7.
thank you. Thank you for the clarification. It is on the agenda.
Well said, Jim. Thank you.
All right,
That's
powers of
it
the
for me.
district. Special.
No, you got one more to do. You got. Make it loader.
Brain hurts.
Room vacancy, function officers. Much of this is what we've been running under. Section 7, Article 5. Are you all in alignment with Section 7, Article 5? Which reads, the commissioner shall receive no remuneration for their service in office. But a commissioner shall be paid actual and necessary expenses incurred while conducting the business of the district.
I don't have a problem with the compensation. The only question I would have is the actual and necessary expenses. Again, when we get to talking about the budget. Tom talked to me about, like, okay, we talked about conferences. Well, one of the things that we could do is instead of, how I did it for 2 people for mileage and that. Another way to do it is to say, well, we've allotted this amount of money for this development. Every commissioner gets $200. Okay, but if we have language that says you get expenses, well, if I go to a conference, my expenses would be my mileage, my hotel or whatever.
You could insert one word. Necessary expenses budgeted.
Or approved by, I would put in,
Budgeted and approved by the commissioners.
right. That's how I would add that,
Yep.
so that we can, because I agree with you from last week that most of the time we can do it on our own dime. But it would be nice to get a little
Some,
something
yep.
back,
I'm with
or if somebody says, well, I really can't afford to go. you know, and say, well, here, you know.
Yeah, cause I don't want it to, someone to be limited to be on this board just because they. They're not retired and have like a big nest egg. I mean, we could get somebody who's like a renter at the login, for example, who just has some really good ideas and just doesn't have so we want to make sure that that person's taken
And-
care of.
The good news when it comes to that is, the Stout has the water quality conference here. And I think it was $32 and it included lunch.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, even,
You need a day off,
Mhm.
if you're working.
even the Lakes and Rivers Conference was not cost.
No,
But if you were just on a very fixed income or limited income, coming up with $175 may not be
Yeah.
high on your budget.
So yeah, I like the wording that you added.
Budgeted in and approved by the
Yeah.
board.
Yep.
Thank you. Article 7, committees. I was looking at it, it's like, we don't need that, but then I don't know, compensation comes up again, but do we need committees listed out? I don't think so. It's kind of putting rules on something that I don't think is necessary. If the board creates a committee to look at dredging or something, whatever it is, some project or whatever it is, I don't know.
Yeah, and I would say in light of our conversation with going to 7 people, and I would hope that we would have some
Gotta have
committees
committees, yeah.
so that we don't burn out 7 people. And,
Right.
there's work to be done. There's resources to tap into.
Right, hopefully the committee chairs are board members and then they can get other electors or people on, or other interested parties to be on their committees,
Right.
much as I do on other boards.
Right.
Yeah. So, and then section 3 is the other committees, so it's kind of saying you have to have these, so I don't really like that section. I don't see the words tied to state law at all, so that could go away.
I would say that I would put something in there about committees. And the committees would be appointed by the board or the board chairperson.
Okay.
Somebody has to be responsible. It's usually the board chairperson, but I can tell you as the board chairperson, I wouldn't appoint a committee without consensus of the board.
How about board can create committees led by,
Board members
Board
and
members.
or citizens.
well, I'd like them to be led by board members and participants can be whoever.
And or, I would put and or citizens.
So you want a committee led by a citizen?
Sure.
Okay.
I have no problem with
I
that.
think that's fine too, because you can have someone who heads up a committee who has a particular skill in an area. And one would hope that a board member would at least want to at least serve on that committee, but
Right.
but someone might be better apt to lead that committee. A good case in point of that is like I'm on the county, we created a broadband task force committee. And I serve on it, but I'm not chairing it because there's somebody who's much better at that had a better broader background in that. And it should be that those committees can be open. They doesn't have to be lake residents or electors or any of that.
Right.
It can be interested or knowledgeable people can be appointed to a committee that can serve. Because you look at some of the people that even some people that have donated have been someone who's doesn't live on the lake, just happens to use it. So,
Right.
and so there's people that use the lake, don't live on it, don't own property on it, but have basically an interest in seeing it
Right.
do well. So those folks would probably love to be on a committee. So,
Well, and yes, I would agree. I don't have.
But it can be basically that whole section doesn't have to be spelled out. It can just be that the board has the right to
Great committees. Yeah.
create committees for
Right.
any reason, blah, blah, blah.
Cool. So I think that,
You have enough to be dangerous?
I do, to get it out to you in a reasonable time, so that hopefully at the next meeting, it's ready
That we can propose it for the
annual
Annual
meeting.
meeting.
Yes.
Correct.
You guys good with that?
Yep.
Thank you.
wonderful.
So
Now-
one question
Okay.
before we move forward. I know you want to do this. Do we need to make a motion to make our board membership 7 members versus 5? Or is that something we can just agree on and move forward? Or are you getting there?
I'm getting there.
All right, I'll shut up.
I gotta give you my playbook
right.
sometime, but, before we have a motion, I'd like one more piece of input would be the audience. Okay, succinctly. Okay, now you're talking to a retired superintendent. I don't say things succinctly, but please try. Okay? Does anybody have a comment?
Do we want to have them come up so that we
I-
can get it?
It would
Sure,
be
yeah, that'd be
easier if you
nice.
came up. You can
You.
go first. That's
Thank you.
okay.
Thank you
I-
for your input.
What I just don't want to do is have a long,
Thank you.
Press the man button.
Yeah, press the little man.
Yeah, your name was again, please?
I'm Kay Cruz Stanton.
Kay.
My husband and I own property in the district. We don't live on the lake. Really fast. First of all, I've frequently been wrong in my life, but I think I remember that the decision to go to 7 members, which would be awesome. I think that has to be made by the people at the annual meeting. Please just check and make sure that I'm either right or wrong. I'd hate to have you guys at this point make a mistake.
it has to be on the agenda.
Okay. So does it get voted by the people at the meeting?
Yep.
That's what I thought. Thank you. Second thing, very, very quickly, getting to the idea of a trust. If you have a trust and you have 2 people living in the household who are both residents, do you then have 3 votes? Or do you have 2? Do you have 1 for the trust, 2 for the residents? And that's a clarification that I would just ask you to make because I find that all very confusing.
I think resident supersedes.
Okay. Third thing, very, very quickly, you were talking about having a driver's license to prove that you could vote. A lot of us who have property, we don't have a driver's license that shows that we live in the district. If you have a trust, perhaps we need to bring proof of the fact that we have a trust that's associated with that. And then the nomination thing, perfect. Thank you so much for saying, get some signatures, because I think that will take care of your problem. That was brilliant. Bye, thanks.
I'll answer one. Go back. What was the second to the last question that you had?
The idea that the driver's license, for example, for us, would not show that we live on the lake.
Right.
It would be, but we can vote.
Right. The other thing that we haven't talked about is we have a list of all of the owners.
Yep.
On the lake. Okay, and that's the first thing that we're gonna check off.
And I don't have a driver's license that says Tim and Kay Cruz Stanton, trust. So,
18 citizen resident owner, so your name or the trust is on the deed.
yes,
So if the trust is on the deed, you get 1 vote.
but I don't have a driver's license saying that I'm the trust.
You're gonna
So-
sign the form and we're gonna
Okay.
take your word. for
Just
it.
to, just tossing these out as things that could be stumbling blocks for
Oh,
you
yeah,
folks.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kay.
Whoever gets there first,
Run.
the on deck circle's over here in the corner.
The wrestling match. You were closer.
But I,
Kinda like touch up.
I'll find you. Jim Sauber,
Press the,
the little guy,
there you go.
Jim Sauber, couple things, one. Consider, you were talking about, who gets the 3-year term, 2-year terms and 1-year term. You're talking about by vote. Another thing to consider is I've seen boards where somebody runs for a 3-year term and somebody else runs for a 1-year term. It might complicate things, but just throwing it out there as an idea.
It only pertains to the first meeting. The rest
first
of,
meeting, or if someone resigns and you have an open 2-year term or 1-year term.
because there'll be 3-year terms after that.
If we have a 3-year term, somebody resigns.
Yep, so 2
halfway
years
through
left.
that, so there's 2 years left. You appoint somebody, they only get 1 year. They
Okay,
only get to the next election cycle. And then they get to fill the term. The terms never, once we have them established, the terms never
right.
vary. It's always otherwise conceivably, you could wind up with everybody being elected like this, all in the same year.
Yep,
And
right.
so,
And you want some turnover. Okay, good.
And
That helps.
appointed positions
Appointed replacements
terms
for
end
remainder
when
of
the county and the
no, remainder of the county.
township
The remainder of the.
that term.
appoint you, you get on
Not
for
the
2
term,
years,
just
I
the
think
year.
Jim. I don't know,
To the
2
next
years.
annual
It's a
meeting.
two or, I can't
Thank you,
remember.
Clara,
Yeah.
but you're,
So our term will end in March where others will end in.
Got it.
August.
got it.
Or
Okay, and you read my notes because the next question was how to handle open board seats.
Open what?
An open board seat, someone resigns, how do you handle it? So you get appointed. The bylaw amendment process, I assume that's in there somewhere.
Yes.
Okay. And then the last one, I hate to open this up, but the discussion, I wasn't at the last meeting. You said there was a question, somebody had 5 owners on a property. If none are residents, 2 are therefore on the deed. The other 3, do they get a vote or not? Okay. So,
Yeah, we may have to have clarification on that specific issue.
And the
I
way
think
I'm
you
gonna
need to-
write it in here,
They wouldn't,
they would not. Your name has to be on the deed.
right?
yeah.
Because
So,
if it's a trust or corporation, you get 1. Otherwise, you could get up to 2, but I don't
But why,
want to see you get
but
5.
if you have multiple owners,
yeah, I think you just need to make it crystal clear what that is, because that's gonna be, I don't know if it'll come up, but based on the comments earlier, it sounded like it could come up.
right?
Okay. And I think that was it. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you, Jim.
Press the mic button, press the mic button. It's the little man. There you
That
go.
right there?
There you go.
Okay.
Start over.
I'm a little nervous about all of this resident, non-resident, property owner trust. Now, I'll just give you a little example. When I was a neighborhood volunteer for the petition drive, and when I went out, I had a list from Pete Hemdahl on exactly who were property owners and who could sign the petition and who couldn't sign the petition. And I'm a little nervous that when we have our annual meeting, we're going to try to filter all these people in that, you know, some are residents, some are non-residents, some is trust. I think the tables are going to be logged up for 4 or 5 hours before we get the annual meeting even going. So I don't know what the state statute says you can or you can't do or as far as who's voting, but I think we have to have a crystal clear, and we better have some tables manned and ready to rock and roll, because I can see this being a real time, not a waster, but a real tedious process. Thank you.
I do believe the first year is going to be far more labor intensive than following years.
We're gonna gladly take volunteers to man those tables.
I even got it kind of figured out, but
Oh, good. Oh, good.
what keeps me
Do
awake?
do I have to push a button or? is it
No, it's,
already
on-
pushed?
it's,
Okay,
it's on, it's red, it's on.
all right, Pete Heimdahl, N 7298, 520th Street. Just to pick up on a point you just made. Gonna have to man the tables with rosters, and you're gonna have to get a very current roster. I don't know how much time in advance it'll take to get that from the county in order to have it there. But that roster ought to be There's a couple of housekeeping points. That roster ought to be sorted in a couple of ways. One by name of every property owner, and another one by address. So that you can search things up very quickly, because it's going to be a worm wrestle, I think. At the registration tables. But I've had a lot of experience doing that. I volunteer to help if you want to put those rosters together. If you want to get one for me, I'll sort it in every direction you want to do, and I'll help.
I got it on my list, Pete.
What's that?
I have it on my list to get that information.
Okay. Well, if you want to give it to me, I'll just pop it on my computer and sort it out in any way you want. And that'd be very, very helpful for the people manning the table. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Nothing on the bylaws?
Yeah. I think it was a very good discussion. I think you got, you're about 98.7% there.
Kind of to follow up on what Pete said, having that printed list, and then if we have a computer, if there was able to have a computer there with that list that can quickly be sorted or searched, it might be helpful. At least there's one computer that somebody could go to.
Each station, yeah.
Each station would be ideal, but I don't know if we're gonna be able to have a bunch of people with the laptops and
It's-
stuff.
It's a simple spreadsheet, and if we have it loaded and ready to go in two different sorts,
Yeah.
they can open two different windows and away we go.
Mhm.
Julie Lammer again. When was your list printed?
I have a list that.
That you would be your
it's
base?
not the most current.
We'll
I-
have to get a new one as of June 1, I believe.
Okay, as of June 1, I would love to help, because any names and people that have transferred and moved on, you guys aren't, and it might not even be recorded yet. So I would be more than happy to help out in any of the name transfers, just since the first of, like, January 1st.
What are you doing August 5th?
I'll be there.
Okay,
But I definitely can,
sorry.
work on that if that would help you guys.
it
So,
would.
okay.
Thank you.
Dawn? Is that, yeah.
I'd have to look on the email that I got.
I
But
think it's.
my plan was to get that list like 2 weeks before the 2 weeks before the annual meeting, so that we can get it as current as possible with all the updates. And then that way, that still gives us enough time to have Pete do the sort, and then have you double check it for things. And to be honest with you, this first year, I don't know that we're gonna be 100% accurate the first year. I mean, if we're gonna err, I'd say we err on the side of probably having too many people vote than not enough. But we can sort through that and we'll get better at it. And when we talked about it at the Lakes and Rivers Conference, they basically said the same thing, is that it's virtually impossible to know where everybody is. And I'm not making excuses now, but I know that we're gonna miss somebody. Especially if you're a resident and your property owner doesn't tell you about this. And somebody's gonna come up and they're gonna say, well, how come I didn't know about this? We'll do the best we possibly can. It is not our intention. But being a realist, I think we have to understand that we may have to say, I'm sorry. But then for the future, that would be important to say how we're going to keep those updated lists. And maybe that goes to our communication discussion that we had about things on being able to push stuff out.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things.
Can you send me a copy of that form that we're gonna use at the meeting?
I can't send you one because this is all I have. But you can take a picture of it. And that's the only one I have, so. I didn't think to steal a clean one, otherwise I would have stole a clean.
We have taken.
Anything else on bylaws?
I have a suggestion for a bylaw. How about at 1827? On each meeting, we take 2 minutes to use the restroom.
Well, all you have to do is make a motion for recess.
I'll make a motion for a recess.
Second.
There's a motion and a made, or a second for a recess. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right.
Okay, you're gonna put that in the minutes, right? All right, we're taking a 5-minute
course I
recess.
will.
Recall the meeting to order. Are we done with bylaws?
Yes, you already asked that too.
Okay, before we get to the annual meeting preparation, I'd like to move the budget development up a little bit. Can we do that? Or do you want, okay, let's stick with the annual meeting preparations and then that topic is done. I sent you an email prior to the meeting, and I apologize for sending that out prior to the meeting. Without giving you a lot of chance to look at it. I won't do that again. But what I did is I put a draft agenda together. I figured the best way to start talking about the meeting is start with a draft agenda. That starts with,
And for those of you at home, you can actually go to the website and it's posted there, the draft agenda.
Right.
And posted as a draft agenda.
is it?
Yep.
Can they do it now?
Yeah, you can do it right now. You
Yeah.
can go to TainerLakeDistrict.org
It's,
and click on agendas, and the annual meeting proposed agendas on there.
okay. The pieces in blue are my comments. As opposed to something that, something as a part of the agenda. For example, I start out, it's August 5th, okay, at the high school. Registration, proof of residency, driver's license, voter certificate, just like we talked about, having those available. One of the things that they talk about in the manual is once people are through the door or whatever, that if you're signed off and you're registered, that you give a colored card, okay? So that when we have a roll call vote or a voice vote, they raise the card. You count the cards, not the hands. Because if you have one card, one person, then you, instead of if your kids come in or non-residents, who's to say what? That was a suggestion out of the book. I throw that out for comment in a second. I'm thinking 4 to 5 tables for registrars. Just like we talked about a lot of this stuff really, actually. That hopefully we can get as updated list as we possibly can. And people can bring their laptops. All we got to do is give them a jump drive and with sorted 2 different ways, or if you want to sort it within the same document, it doesn't matter to me. I think maybe 2 different documents, toggle back and forth might be easier, but whatever you think is best. And then we have the property registration list that we talked about. And that would be the registration. And I do believe that we may not start the annual meeting right at 1 o'clock. If we open the doors at 12 for people to come in. I don't think what we want to do is open the doors at 12 and then take till 2:30 to start the annual meeting, because those people that came at 12 are going to be a touch angry by 2:30. So, I mean, I think we gotta set a goal for trying to get through the people in an hour. You know, so that we started. And there's gonna be people that are gonna come at 1:30 and wanna, do that too. So I think what we have to do, ideally, it would be nice to have people manning the registration table that aren't residents voting people. I mean, it would be nice to have other people do it, but anyway, we can kind of work through that. And I think one of the things that we, again, voting, we resident property owners, you must be present. I think we have to stress that. There's no proxy votes or online votes, one person, one vote, and written ballots. That's what I had put down for my notes.
Looks like you wrote the bylaws. That's good. So the written ballots is for the commissioners,
Commissioners, correct.
voting for the projects and the budget are by card?
Yep.
Thank you.
Usually by statute, only when you vote, I know for like school boards, the only time you could use a secret ballot is for the voting of the positions. President, vice president, things like, other than that, everything has to be out in the open. And, or unless it specifically says secret ballot. Anybody have any problem with that? Am I forgetting anything is what I'm really worried about. I know my wife is done. She used to work for the Northwest Synod of Wisconsin, and so she's done a lot of assemblies where you register and vote. I will tap her knowledge base as to how what works best on that, but I'm just thinking buying like 500 pink 3x5 cards is all. I'm not thinking of anything fancy. Be nice if we could figure out a way to use cell phones. And I know there's some balloting that you can use via cell phone, but I don't think we can do that and keep track of that.
No.
Okay. Anything on that? We good with that? I'm gonna come back to the who in a little bit on some of this. One of the other things I did on this agenda is after introductions, I put a parliamentarian down. Now I'm throwing this out for discussion. And it's a little selfish on my part because by the book, I have to run that meeting. I've been at a lot of annual meetings. And the problem with them is I have the basics of Robert's rules. I can get through motions and amendments. But then you can get into the weeds on submotions and everything else. With having, let's say on a good day, we have 300 people there. And what if we do something wrong or somebody calls somebody says that we're not doing something right? So now I'm running the meeting, trying to think of parliamentary procedure, making sure that everything is moving smoothly. We could get bogged down in Robert's rules very easily. I'm not saying that people would use it to stifle the discussion, but it's a potential. It's the same potential as getting 5 people from a drinking establishment run for the board. I mean, it may not, it probably won't happen, but it could.
Do you have one in mind?
No, I'm looking for suggestions, but I was just wondering what you thought of that. And the other thing is, of course, you may have to pay for that. Because we wouldn't want it to be a resident, we wouldn't want it to
Right.
be a voting member, we wouldn't want it to be, unless somebody on this board wants to act as the parliamentarian, which is okay too. I have no preconceived notions. All I wanted to do is run it by the board as to what you think about the idea.
Well, I think it's a great idea. I think it's important and I would like to ask the county's corporation council if that's something that he would be willing to serve as, and if not, if he can recommend somebody, because I know this comes up at a county board meeting and even comes up with people who've been on the county board over a decade. And Nick will jump in and say, based on, proper procedures and Robert's rules, this needs to be done this way in order for this to be considered, or blah, 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 that type of thing.
Right.
I mean, he would be an ideal candidate for it. I don't know that it's something that he would necessarily want to do. His ears are burning somewhere right now. But I could at least ask him whether there would be a cost involved, whether the county would let him do that since he's the county's corporation counsel, and there may be some sort of rule about that. And if not, if he has recommendations or a resource that we could use for that. I mean, because ideally it would be not only someone that's not necessarily a lake resident, but also just somebody who's utterly uninvested in it other than managing the meeting.
Right.
I couldn't agree more, Jim. I think in a perfect world, this person wouldn't have to travel for hours to get here, but would be someone from outside the city of Menominee or the county of Dunn, just so they can be Switzerland. And they can show that they're Switzerland, that they can be neutral on the subject and only judging things by the book. Not because they like you or dislike you, not you
Right.
personally.
I get it.
but
Isn't the county clerk usually acts as a parliamentary for your meeting?
Not really. Well, maybe he's not the one that has the knowledge base.
Oh.
It's always Nick, the corporation counsel, who will say this or that, as far as making sure that something, he's got the clerk's got to know that stuff too, but if there's a question, it always defers to Nick. I could also, I do a lot of work with the folks in Barron County, and I could even reach out to someone in one of my government contacts in Barron County to get, if they have a suggestion for parliamentarian.
There is a Facebook group of Wisconsin Association of Parliamentarians.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah,
Never-
good idea. I had
Who
no
knew?
idea. I had never thought of this. So good point.
I mean,
There's
it's,
just a guy that didn't want to run the meeting.
let me tell you, the first annual meeting back when I was the first superintendent, at an annual meeting, you could pass school. You could build a school by a vote in an annual meeting. My first annual meeting as a baby superintendent, I had a motion to have a school built, a brand new high school built. You want excitement, man. There was entertainment value in that meeting. I've learned my lesson from that. And so it's just one of those things I know from running meetings, to concentrate on all of that stuff at one time. It's very difficult. And here's the other thing, the optics of it from the people in the audience are, you're trying to do 5 things at one time. I can tell you, and you're under pressure, you can't do 5 things well at one time. And by the way, you have an audience of 300 people that are gauging how you're doing.
Right. And we can't make a mistake on this because it's not like we have time to make it up.
Right.
Or reschedule.
Right. You get one shot at it.
Right.
So, you want to do it right. You can have you can have a special meeting. You can have another annual meeting, but it doesn't get better. It only gets worse. Okay. So, if you would ask Nick.
Yeah.
And then if not there, then I think let me know what his recommendations are. And the other thing is, I guess, I would encourage us, when we have our next meeting, then if there's a cost to it, we certainly have money now that we can do it and we can pay for it. I would encourage.
I
us
would
to do it.
imagine it's not gonna be a ridiculous cost for that, but.
Well, they don't have to show up for the registration. It's just
No,
the meeting. And
right.
realistically, I don't know that the meeting is going to be a huge event anyway, because
Mhm.
there's really, there's a minor project on there and that's about it.
Correct.
Chair, one of the things, there's some things on here that we don't have, but I put them on there so that, again, like we did the budget, they're placeholders for the next year. Chairperson, and committee reports. I guess I was expecting to the group to do a little educating of the assembly as to the meetings that we've had, the discussions that we've had, just kind of what brought us up to this point, highlighting donations, people involved in the community, those kinds of things. Other than that, if we had committees in the future, I would see that we would have, the chairpersons of those committees make a briefing of the assembly so that the assembly knows that it just isn't, four guys sitting around having a good time and that there's actually work being done. Presentation and submission of the annual audit. I'm recommending that we don't have an audit this year simply because it's about 7 people and 7 numbers. I don't know that we need to audit it that much, and that there can be a treasurer's report monthly, which, by the way, I forgot to do on this agenda. Yeah, you're off the hook unless we want to go back to it. But normally we would, by the rules, were to have an audit, which I don't know that it's an extensive audit by an auditing firm, but I think it's somebody, it defines what that audit is, and it's somebody usually with an account, some sort of an accounting background that looks over your books. It's not affiliated with your organization. We may have to pay for that, but normally you'd have that. Approval of the bylaws. We would present the bylaws that we've developed and they would be approved. And I didn't know if you were thinking that we would approve the bylaws. I was going to recommend that the assembly
Should be
approve.
voted on by the assembly, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to be on, that's why the question mark is there, so that.
Do you guys agree that they need to be voted on by the general membership or?
I think we want to be in agreement what we display to the general membership.
Were
right?
proposed.
Oh,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And they can make a motion and they could change that too conceivably, but it's a lot of work going through that to,
That's where the parliamentarian comes
There
in.
you go.
right. Consideration of the projects. We have data collection and planning grant is our projects coming up. I hate to use the word strategic planning because that brings in different kinds of things, but it's the planning grant. Okay, but it's essentially going to be a strategic plan or a management plan
I like strategic plan as far as the term, but
or management
I
plan.
don't have a problem with strategic plan either, because.
Okay,
we need one.
I didn't want to just because I used to do strategic planning, I just didn't want to. Okay. Then we consider the tax levy. Then I had on here, consider approval of expanding the elected commissioners from 3 to 5 people. So it's posted on the agenda that we sent out to everybody. That there would be, and this would be typical of what you had talked about, can anybody put anything on the agenda? Well, I think that if it's a power of, it has to be put on the agenda before it can be acted upon.
Yeah.
And so that somebody can't say, well, they can't motion from the floor to have an agenda item put on the agenda. It has to be put on the agenda prior to and published prior to the meeting. And I would assume that one of us would speak to the issue. I hope it wouldn't be the president, but that one of the other board members or commissioners would speak to the issue of the reason why we're expanding it. And then after that, you would have, depending on the outcome, I mean, the default is 3. And depending on the outcome, it would be 5. Then we act as, then when the board acts as, that was one of the ones that I wanted to, speak to the bylaws, is the board acts as as the nominating committee instead of a special other committee. Our goal would be to get the number of people vacancies +1, so that there would be, if there's 5 vacancies, it would be more than 5 people running. So that there's some,
Why?
well, it's just a goal.
I mean, that can be the goal, but if there's 5 vacancies and only 5 people not get nominated, that makes the meeting a lot shorter.
Okay,
Because, because you're not having extra stuff. Like, for example, a lot of times for county supervisor positions, a lot of them are not, there's nobody else on the ballot. I don't know who the 4 people who aren't voting for me are voting for when I see the returns, but there are at least 4 people always that are getting votes besides me. So
okay,
that can, I mean, sure, be great to have that more, but I mean, the goal would be at least to have the same number of nominations that would fill
Right.
the number of open seats.
Right. Right.
I think is more important.
So the board to act as nominating committee bullet point. Your intent there was. Or
Exactly what we did in our
we talked,
discussion.
yeah, okay.
We would pull in the names and it wouldn't be a separate committee of 2 people or whatever. It would be the full board.
I'd almost say, I'd like to see us in a recruiting mode more than, I mean, we're not gonna limit them. It's the process that will limit them, but I'm concerned we won't have anyone and we just need.
Now, I think we'll have people,
Mhm.
whether we have 2 people for every position. I don't know we'll get that many, but I think we'll have. people
It's hard to say. Some people like the idea of this, but a lot of people don't like the idea of serving. And don't want to necessarily go to a bunch of meetings and talk budgets.
Yeah.
Cause that's been, I've tried to recruit people for open county board seats. And I don't want to sit through budget meetings. I don't want to go to meetings, And county board supervisor, you at least get a stipend for showing up for a meeting. So there is that benefit, but yeah, ideally, my goal would be if we have 5 open seats, we have 5 people to fill it. And I know we're gonna have probably 2, because I'm assuming the 2 of you are gonna want to run for an actual seat, right?
Real job?
Yes, the real job. I'm just
Do
assuming.
I get paid twice as much as what
Yeah,
I get
yeah.
paid
So
now?
you get you'll get paid 100 times more.
Okay.
You'll get
Yeah.
paid,
All right,
yes.
yeah.
So that leaves, not a huge number that actually needs to get recruited
Right,
or whatever. So,
but our goal should be to get at least 5.
yes, to get the same number
Right,
if the meeting votes to expand the board
Right.
to 5.
but even if we had 5 people and only 3 positions, that's okay too.
Yeah, right.
That's all I had for the agenda, on the agenda development on that.
Okay.
Am I forgetting anything That's the,
Is there any reason to have any sort of public comment period in an annual meeting?
we can have. I looked at, I think I looked at actually at Beaver Dams or Trigos, and they do have a public comment.
I think that probably we might have to add that. I mean, sure, it's gonna open up for a bunch of time. But we can again put some sort of time, we can make it a 60-second time limit thing. And actually have a timer. And ask, you know, even that could be published in the agenda. There'll be a public comment period due to the size of the meeting. There's a 60-second and time limit will be enforced. Perhaps.
With the goal being for them to,
Just so that they can just have their voices heard if they want to, just like we do at this meeting.
My only stipulation would be this. I would like to be able to say that they have a public comment on items on the agenda,
That could be,
Oh, yeah, there you go.
as opposed to,
why are you
Do we-
doing this?
do we want Julie to stand up and say, you guys gotta move the buoys? Or,
Yeah.
but on the other hand, now just using that as an example, using that as an example, somebody getting up and saying, I know this isn't on the agenda for the annual meeting, but I'd like you to look into buoy placement or taking responsibility for, talking to the township, assuming the role for buoy placement or the weed cutting issue that we're gonna be dealing with on the next agenda item or whatever. I mean, they can get up and say that.
Yeah,
And we can say, well, do we want to listen to that? So I guess I really kind of contradicted what I just said, but
right.
it can go both ways.
I don't know. What's the consensus of this group? About.
I like
having-
the idea of sticking to the agenda. There's a time and a place for issues like what Julie brought up. We have.
Like meetings like this.
yes,
Yeah, meeting like this, we also have email opportunities so people can bring that up at any time and it can be addressed at a regular meeting. So I think for brevity, I think it's good to stick to the agenda.
agreed.
Oh,
I'm convinced and I think that, I mean, the annual meeting is sort of it's a special meeting. It's basically a meeting to conduct the business of the district for the year. There isn't, you know, there's, I guess the time for public comment is leading up to it. All these meetings are open to everybody are published. And all the meetings after the annual meeting will also be open and available, so.
And they can get a hold of us via email. I have responded to every email that's been forwarded to me via the, you know, however you have that set up. I don't know if anybody else gets them, but,
Everybody gets them.
oh, okay. I've been responding to every single one of them.
Okay.
so. Communicate. I mean, that's the only thing we can do.
So each thing that'll be voted on, the bylaws, the project,
Bylaws, the way that it's listed here is the action items would be, the first thing would be the bylaws.
Yep.
Second thing would be the project, which would be the
as I
grant.
said, yep.
Okay, the third thing
it's the
would
budget.
be the budget. Then the fourth thing after the budget is the tax levy. Okay, you do the tax levy
Yeah,
after
yeah.
the budget. And then after that, let me see, 3, 4, 5 would be expanding from 3 to 5 elected positions.
You just approved the bylaws. It says there's 7.
Well, you may have to change that if they
Maybe one,
maybe I have to reverse the order.
it's a thought.
Yeah, that's a good point. We'll reverse the order of the bylaws and we'll put the bylaws at the end.
Okay,
Okay, and then that way we can make a notation that if it doesn't change, then we can just state it.
What if any of those things are not passed?
then they don't happen.
So we don't get bylaws, or we don't have a budget, or we don't have any projects.
Welcome to the world of annual meetings. Yeah,
This happened actually at the county board, this past fall. Where, the budget was passed. And then we had to vote on, levy or some, basically to fund the budget.
Yep.
And that required, I think a 2/3 vote, and it didn't pass. So there was now no funding for the budget that was approved. So we could not leave until somebody figured something out. It's like the people who voted it down then had to come up with some way of alternative. It was a challenging evening. Eventually one person was convinced was able to submit it to be voted on again, and they voted to pass the funding. So yeah, there is that possibility. That any of that stuff could be voted down, and that's what happens.
And my answer to that would be that at the end, we recess the annual meeting and convene it to another time, reconvene it to another time, so we could rework the budget to represent the budget.
Is that a special meeting then?
That, well, if you reconvene it, it would be a continuation of the annual meeting.
Oh.
If you adjourned your meeting and had a special meeting, then you gotta go through all the notice razzmatazz again.
Okay.
Or you can say, we're not leaving until we have something.
Yeah, and that was the case with the county is that by state statute that the budget had to be published and submitted the next day. So we couldn't leave until something was settled that night.
And
Either
we-
the budget had to be rewritten and voted on again, or so.
Or we would have to have a new annual, or we wouldn't have a budget, we just have to fundraise.
That's right, right.
And so that could be a possibility, but hopefully that won't happen.
Yeah, let's-
Hopefully we've generated enough momentum that those kinds of things won't happen. But your point about the bylaws is a good point. I'll flip that order and we'll put that bylaws at the end. And then there comes the adjournment. Anything else on meeting preparation?
Oh, that sounds,
Okay, the who part of all of this. I told you I'd get around to that, the registration, and manning the registration, I think. If each of us could find some volunteers to do that, if each of us could do one person. I know who I'm gonna get, but she doesn't know it yet, but I think that's the biggest thing is that we need, I'd say, in my notes, I said 3 to 4. I think it should be 4 to 5. And then I think through the registration, those of us, I think as commissioners, I think we should be out there too. To be able to answer questions or whatever. So it would be, there'd be 2 people per each table. And then we can go in and convene the meeting. Other than that, I think that the chairperson's notes, I got that covered. And I will speak to the consideration of the project and the grant. I will speak to that. Tom, if you will speak, and other board members, you can all speak to it, but I'm just saying, I'd like to have somebody will be an advocate for that. And Tom, if you'll speak to moving from 3 to 5. Sure. And the election process, I think we're all gonna be involved in that, but we'll be up to speed by the time we get to that point. Anything else? Everybody know what they're doing? Okay. The budget, the budget. Asked Jim to put the budget into the on the website, so you folks can look at the budget as.
There's now a category, main menu category on the website that says budgets.
Oh. Cool.
So you can look at it, and I put your budget notes there as well.
Okay. Good. Yeah, I think some of those notes are important. I went through and made all the corrections that we talked about at the last meeting. I added special charges, special assessments as placeholders. Repeating again, there's no proposals for special assessments, okay? I don't want people to go away thinking that somebody's gonna be specially assessed. And I put zeros in all of the places where there should be zeros. I guess the other revisions under operations. I backed off the conference. And I put a note in there. It's calculated for 2 commissioners to the Lakes and River Conference. That's just okay. I like Tom's idea of saying, okay, we can take that. If something comes up, basically figuring, hey, everybody gets $200 or how many there is, we can, that's how much we have. $1,700 for conferences. You just divide that out on how many people we have, and that's what we have to spend. Facility rental, that's the same. I put $1,000 in there because it's going to cost us for the high school auditorium. If we do strategic planning, we may have to rent some facilities or go to someplace. We can't, if you're going to plan and ask for people's input, you can't always tell them to come to your place. You may have to go to theirs and go to where it's convenient for them. Insurance, $2,500 is what we were given as a budget figure. It's going to be around there. The total operational expenses was $10,731. Projects, that hasn't changed from the first edition. It was $5,000 for contracted services, consultants, or whatever that takes, and I'll refine that as we get into the budget process or the grant writing process. But that's some of those costs we're going to. Some of it will be matched, some of it will be recouped, depending on how much time we and how much volunteer time we have. So I put in the, if you'll notice the comment on the first one under tax levy, I simply levied the whole piece. Now, this is a discussion for next month. If you want to keep if you want to use use up totally the donations, or if you want to hold back some of the money on the donations for the next budget cycle. It's something to consider. We don't have to take the total budget amount minus what we got for donations and then levy the net of those. We can keep some of that back, or we can use it. I didn't do it. I just left it. For those of you who are interested, of course, being the geek I am, $15,731 equates to 9 cents a thousand for your tax levy. So basically, for $100,000 home, your tax impact is going to be $9.66. For the average house, 250,000 or property, it'll be $24.15. Will be the tax impact based on the 162 million total valuation we have for the district. It's an estimate. You know, so don't hold me, but that is kind of the impact. And we'll have those information, we'll dial that in a little bit better at the meeting. So what we would publish would be this budget summary sheet. That's what we would publish in the newspaper. The other thing that we would want to do a little bit, this is up to June. You can see there's a column in there. It's our actuals. We haven't really spent any money yet. So that if we get between now and July, if we get some actuals, we'll have to put in our actual expenditures in those categories. But we haven't spent any money. So pretty frugal group. So I would entertain a motion, or if there's further discussion, I would entertain more discussion. But if no discussion, I'd entertain a motion that this is our proposed budget. Or if I have to do something else, we'll do it.
I'll make a motion that this is our proposed or approved budget or proposed budget for 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say no. It's unanimous. So $15,731 is our budget. Remember, on my budget material, I said you get the budget first, then you do the tax. And we did exactly what we said we were going to do. Anything else on budget? Okay, moving forward, next meeting, I have a topic. I had a gentleman contact me actually on the way here. He wants to do some weed cutting. Okay. He contacted the DNR and the DNR said, well, because you have a lake district, they have to give you permission to do the weed cutting. I have no idea we have no policy on weed cutting or whatever, but what I told this gentleman is that is a great discussion for the next meeting on June 29th. And so that's the first agenda item that I would recommend that we put on that is weed cutting. It would also give us a little time to do the research and to say, I'd like to hear what the DNR side of the issue is that part of our, are we approving it? And if it is under our auspices, the question would be that I would raise is what conditions or what stipulations do we want to make for weed cutting? This gentleman and his neighbor, they're going to pay for it. There's an outfit in New Auburn that does the weed cutting that will come in, do the weed cutting, haul it away. And all they do is write out a check. And so it's really no financial burden to us. It's more to me of a policy consideration as to how we want to do that.
And whether that's actually what the DNR says too.
I'm not being cynical, but
Well, Mark said this.
trust but verify.
Right, there we go.
That's an old bargaining tool. It's
Mhm.
trust but verify. So that's one item I'd like to put on the next agenda. We have the budget approved. I think we have to approve the agenda for the annual meeting. So we can get that put in. And is there anything else? I see it as the main focus of that meeting is just the tidying up for the annual meeting. If you could bring we'll talk about the annual meeting again, but if you can bring your suggestions of people to man tables or people that are willing to volunteer, people in the audience that, you know, if they want to get involved and volunteer. We haven't said no to anybody that's volunteered yet.
No.
So, that, I see,
Do we need to approve bylaws?
I think we need to approve the proposal of the bylaws.
Yeah.
At
Thank
the
you.
next meeting, yes.
Good point. Anything else? Oh, I think that we should, part of the bylaws and part of the annual meeting, I think we should again have the non-resident resident discussion. So that it's clear. And so that that we have, you know, that you've defined it and we've got it clarified. Is there anything else that we should add on to that?
No, just also to maybe make clear that the people who can vote are different than the people who were able to sign the petition.
Right.
Totally different, and I think that's a confusing point to some people. So just that we need to, whether that's clarified verbally, or I don't think it has to be in the bylaws, but we just need to make sure that people are aware that it's two different things.
I'm gonna put it down as a subtopic of the annual meeting is that the electors and having that electors discussion.
Yes. Yep, that's good.
Anything else? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
There's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Jerry, you seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you for coming all. Good comments.